Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most important tools you'll ever use in programming, Python functions. If you want to write smarter, cleaner code, you are in exactly the right place. And hey, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more explainers just like this one.
Okay, let's get right into it. You know that feeling when you're coding and you realize you're writing the same chunk of code over and over and over again? It works, sure, but it's messy. It's hard to read. And if you have to change one tiny thing, you have to hunt it down and change it everywhere. We call that the repetitive way. But what about that empty box on the right? What's the smart way? Well, by the end of this, we're going to fill that in. The solution to all that mess is what I like to call the ultimate code shortcut, the function. So what on earth is it? At its heart, a function is just a block of code that you've given a name to. The whole idea is that it does one specific thing, and you can reuse it whenever you want. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a recipe. You write the instructions for a cake once, you name it awesome chocolate cake, and then anytime you want that cake, you just say, let's make the awesome chocolate cake. You don't have to rewrite the entire recipe from scratch every single time. Okay, that sounds pretty great in theory, but how do we actually write our own recipe in Python? Let's break down the anatomy of a function. There are really just 5 key parts to this. First, you start with the keyword def. That's you telling Python, hey, I'm about to define a function. Then you give it a unique function underscore name. After that comes a pair of parentheses. We'll talk more about those in a minute. Then you have the colon. That little dot is super important. It signals that the function's code is about to begin. And finally, you have the indented code block. This is a big deal in Python. That space at the beginning of the lines is how Python knows what code actually belongs inside your function. And just like naming a file, you've got to follow a few simple rules for your function names. It has to start with a letter or an underscore. It can't ever start with a number, and you can't have any spaces. The standard way to handle that is to just use an underscore instead, like calculate the underscore total. Getting these rules down now will save you a ton of headaches later, trust me. All right, enough with the rulebook. Let's see how these things actually work. This is where the magic happens. So remember those parentheses? Well, they're not just for decoration. They're how we pass data into our function. We call that data a parameter. In this example, we're calling our greet function and we're handing it the name Devadaga. The function takes that name and uses it to create a custom message. This is what makes functions so powerful. You write the logic once and you can use it with all sorts of different data. But what if you need the function to give you something back? The last function just printed something to the screen. This add function actually produces a result that you can use later. To do that, we use the return keyword. The function does its calculation, and then return sends that value back out. We can then catch that value and store it in a variable like we're doing here with result. This is absolutely crucial. If you need to get data out of a function, you need to use return. Functions can also be really flexible. Check this out. We can give a parameter a default value right in the definition. Here, we're saying that if a name isn't provided, just use the word guessed. So if we call greet with nothing in the parentheses, it falls back on that default. But if we do give it a name, like Rahul, it'll use that instead. It's a great little trick for making your arguments optional. So we've seen what functions are and how you build them. But let's get back to the big question. Why does any of this matter? Let's revisit that problem from the beginning and see the payoff. And there it is, the big reveal. That's our aha moment. On the left, you've got that clunky, repetitive code we started with. And on the right, the smart way. We defined our logic just one time inside a function called show_sum. And now, anytime we need to do that calculation, we just call the function. It's clean. It's obvious what it does. It's just better. And that right there is the whole point. This is why we use functions. Your code becomes instantly cleaner because the logic isn't scattered everywhere. It's reusable, so you're not writing the same code again and again. And because of those two things, your code becomes so much easier to manage, to read, and to fix, especially as your projects get bigger and more complex. Now, before we finish up, I want to save you from some of the most common headaches that trip up beginners when they first start with functions. Let's take a quick look at what to watch out for. Seriously, try to remember this slide. The number one mistake, hands down, is forgetting the parentheses when you call a function. If you just type the function's name, you're not actually running it. Another classic is doing a calculation but then forgetting to return the value, so it just disappears. Of course, messing up the indentation will break your Python code every time. And finally, just be mindful of your variable names inside and outside the function so they don't get mixed up. If you can dodge these common mistakes, you're going to be in great shape.
And there you have it. That's your quick start guide to Python functions. They are truly the building blocks of good code. They take you from repeating yourself to being an efficient, smart coder who reuses their work. So I'll leave you with this to think about. What's the first reusable function you're going to build?